coming back around to reviewing Hot Toys figures, of course predominantly on Batman and Spider-Man, and I figured that a good kicker to kind of initiate this new round of Hot Toys figure reviews I'm going to be doing, I figured I would, no pun intended, I would tackle one of the ones that was on my radar and was set for release this year, and I finally came around to making a big boy purchase, a massive one that could probably put me in debt. And that's going to be the XE Suit Batman from Arkham Origins, provided by Hot Toys. A quick look at the box, which is actually a lot smaller than I was anticipating because I know that this is a pretty girthy figure, so to see it that it's pretty compact in the traditional Hot Toys box is actually pretty impressive. Nevertheless though, I kind of miss when Hot Toys would go a little bit of the extra mile on their packaging. It's still a very premium quality feeling box, especially with the actual use of the plastic as well as the cardboard inside that secures the figure, but I just feel like it's kind of run its course that Hot Toys keeps using the same template for virtually every Hot Toys figure they've been doing for the past, I want to say 2 or so years, where you have the window covered up by this flap that you can use to look at the figure inside, sure, but it's the same kind of design regardless of what property it is. Nevertheless, at the front you have this iconic image of Batman from the Arkham Origins DLC, Cold Cold Heart, and then at the top, 1/6 scale collectible figure, the logos not only on the front but also on the top and bottom, and on the sides and back, as well as a little bit towards the bottom of the window. You'll notice an awful lot of that aesthetic that Hot Toys continues to use for pretty much all of the Arkham figures thus far, with a little triangular A, but this time it's color coded to fit the orange aesthetic of his suit. And then of course you're gonna have an awful lot of good feeling quality all over the surface of the box, from a matted finish to a little bit of a felt type around the logos, the design of those A's, as well as the artwork on the front. And that's pretty much the extent of it. So if you're looking for any kind of little extra details to really make the unboxing experience worthwhile, it's not going to be all that different from other ones. Now, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different here when it comes to Hot Toys figure reviews going forward. I'm going to cover roughly about half of the accessories before we get to the main event, which is going to be Batman himself, or the figure in question. And the reason why this is because A, to kind of just break up the pacing of the reviews just a little bit so they feel a little bit more fresh, a little bit more new and different. But also because these accessories is frankly what you are greeted with firsthand when you open the figure itself. You are greeted with a tray that pretty much comes with a couple of gadgets that are very much staple for any Batman figure, Hot Toys or not, as well as a plethora of hand accessories. First and foremost, you not only get 1 but 2 batarangs, which are very clean but also retain that Arkham aesthetic. You can tell that they haven't really been used all that much, but it makes sense considering that this is the Origins version of Batman, and so these are going to be coming out mint condition right out of the factory, or in this case Wayne Manor. And then of course the archetypal Arkham grapple gun, which has of course the very girthy handle, the little circular disc there in the middle, as well as the detachable grapple and nozzle at the front. Still don't know exactly what is the function behind disassembling them, but at least it is there in case you want to fidget with it. And I do notice that, again, much like the Batarangs, they kind of retain that clean look, like they haven't really been used a lot. Plus, the disc in the middle has this kind of like half silver, half black aesthetic that I don't remember the Arkham Asylum or Arkham City versions having, but of course, it speaks to the Origins version of this gadget. Then we get to our full range of hand accessories, which come with, of course, several of the usual gestures you expect from a Hot Toys figure. It comes with, of course, fisted hands that are clenched up and very well sculpted, as well as these semi-open hands that are designed to hold some kind of gadget that involves a form of a handle, whether it be the grapple gun or a secondary gadget that we'll cover later in the review. 2 slightly pinched hands that are very much designed to hold the batarangs in place. Most of the pictures that I've seen show him holding 2 batarangs at a time, but of course it's up to your preference. But then we get to the quirkier hand accessories. I understand that they do have some kind of functionality for the remaining accessories, but they still look weird by themselves. You have this, what I like to call the bunny ears hand. I understand that this is supposed to be a gesture to kind of make him look, or at least pose him, in a way that looks like he's using some kind of detective mode, or kind of have the fingers placed up to his temple to make it look like he's using a scanner or something. But by itself, it looks like either bunny ears or the peace sign. Throw up a peace sign to freeze, maybe to kind of symbolize peace and be like, hey man, stop fighting, cool down. Wow, I just went full Owen Wilson there. And then you have these very, very extended open hands. The description reads as these are meant to be ice melting hands, so he's supposed to kind of place them on some ice so that he can melt it away and be able to move forward to then thwart Mr. Freeze, but again, by themselves, they just look kind of awkward, especially since there's not a big enough piece of ice with the remaining accessories to really hone in on these hands. But speaking of those relaxed hands that are by default attached to the figure himself, it's time to take a look at Arkham Origins XE Suit Batman. And you can see, he is in fact a big boy. Look how massive he is. There's my hand. And of course, he's going to be in the 1/6 scale, so he's going to be roughly about a foot tall, maybe even a little taller than that. But he barely manages to fit into the light box. There's an awful lot of horizontal room, but there's barely any headroom from the top light here to the bottom. And I had to make some major adjustments towards the lights, the mic, and the camera to make sure that everything looks very concise and well on camera. And from what I can tell, this guy definitely makes a massive impression, and that's because Hot Toys is once again making sure that they nail it out of the park as far as one-on-one representation. And the representation is definitely on point. You can see right here that this is in fact the XE suit that Batman wore in the DLC for Arkham Origins titled Cold Cold Heart, where he has to take on, of course, you can kind of tell from the name, he's going to be tackling Mr. Freeze. And man, it is in fact a looker. The overall concept of the suit itself is just beckoning for a Hot Toys figure. It's basically Hot Toys at their A game, making sure that an awful lot of the representation, the sculpt and the detail and everything that you paid top quality money for is going to be found here in this version of Batman, because he is in fact a centerpiece. He is in fact the type of Hot Toys figure you put up on the shelf, you take a look at, somebody walks in and says, yo, what Batman is that from? And it's a very impressionable figure. Most recently, prior to actually making the purchase and bringing it home, I found him at a vendor at Frankensons, and he still managed to catch my eye, even if he was already on my radar. So to see an awful lot of the little details and nuances that they were able to take from the 3D render and Hot Toys making it happen in physical form is definitely found here. And it's pretty interesting how they kind of came up with a couple of little quirks and cheats or workarounds to make it happen, because with the exception of the torso and the chest area as well as the head sculpt, the rest of the body is more or less custom made to fit this Batman, while at the same time pretty much wrapping it in a nylon suit right underneath. You can kind of see that coming through throughout the limbs, the legs, the forearms, the knees and the thighs, and then most especially the crotch area. You'll notice that you have a very nylon kind of fabric that is pretty much wrapping the entirety of the figure. Once you get to the armor pieces, they're all pretty much tied on to that nylon piece via either Velcro, straps, or simply just having the molded plastic wrap around the limbs or the areas that it needs to be at with enough force to make sure that it's not slipping and sliding all over the place. And for the most part, you can see that this works really well in favor of the figure. And there's a key emphasis in the term most of the time, because there are a couple of caveats that come with the territory of developing a suit like this. For me, I mean, it's got to be the chest area. Just look at that bat symbol embroidered on there in a glossy finish, but then underneath you have really durable plastic, really hard core, like, I don't know what the material is, but it's this kind of plastic that is not cheap. It's very, very top tier quality plastic that pretty much cements a very durable quality for the middle part of the torso, the chest area, the chest armor, and even the area that's supposed to look like it's some form of padded material there on the abdomen is still very well constructed, as well as the shoulder pieces, the cowl, and then that little collar area that is very durable but also airbrushed with this metallic paint that still retains an awful lot of the damage that he sustained during his battle with Mr. Freeze. And an awful lot of those little nuances are found throughout the suit that just bring it to life and make it much more premium quality feel, and very, very much a showcase as you navigate the figure and just take it all in as far as how he looks. And though I mentioned that my favorite parts are in fact those shoulder pieces and the chest because of the way that they look weathered and they look like they have that airbrush to give it some battle damage, It's really when we get to the shin area where we have these pieces right here that make up the shin guards that look very cool, but then right above it, you guessed it, you have actual die-cast pieces to represent what seems to be like a hydraulic system to get the knee fluctuating in place, especially with this little harness wrapped around the knee area. When you do move this area around, you see an awful lot of movement going alongside the hydraulic system. Of course, it's not hydraulics in the full sense of the term, but it's able to emulate the illusion much better than you would have it guessed when pulling him out of the package. And so seeing an awful lot of that come through is really well done, especially with an awful lot of the gashes as you see here on the thigh pieces, the claws on both the toes, as well as the ones on his gauntlets. Sadly, it's when you get to those chrome areas that I really wish that we would have gave it an extra touch-up of that die-cast that we saw coming through here on the hydraulic system, because even though I really like the way that they, like I said, gave it the weathered look here on these die-cast pieces, these other chrome areas on the gauntlets, as well as the ones on the biceps here to give it that much more mechanical feel, are actually just airbrush paint on rubberized plastic. And for Hot Toys, it doesn't look the best. It looks great in pictures, but when I actually pulled them out of the box, it's actually these areas right here that I do think they could have been handled just a little bit better from a paint standpoint, especially the ones here on the bicep. Even though there's great sculpting happening, I really do wish that they would have chosen a different shade of chrome to either give it a much more muted look or go full blown all the way at the other side of the spectrum and make it super reflective so that it looks like it's functionable, even though it's not. It's made out of a durable plastic. The way that they went with this kind of matted coat, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because of the sizing, or maybe sitting right next to these other orangey areas that look very stickered on. It kind of gives it a slightly cheapy look, at least a cheap look in comparison to Hot Toys, relative to Hot Toys. I'm not saying that it's just cheap by default. For other companies, say McFarlane or even Figuarts or even damn near Mafex, I would say that this is pretty top notch. But when you're dealing in the high class tier of someone like Hot Toys, you expect just a little bit extra. Same thing goes for the little orange accents right here that are supposed to represent neon lights, because if you look at the artwork, or at least if you played the DLC for Arkham Origins, you'll notice that throughout the suit he's kind of wired up with this yellow or orangey wiring that is supposed to be fueling his suit, and they tried to emulate that here, but instead it's just painted on linings. I wasn't expecting full-blown LEDs, of course not, that is rather impractical, but I was just hoping for actual orange wires to just kind of give it that fluorescent feel, and instead it's just painted on stickers here in the middle area where you bend at the weenus or right underneath the knee pads right here. And I kind of wish that they would have spent a little extra, at least similar to that of what you see going on right here on the underpart of the bat symbol. You can see right here that the wiring is actually sculpted into the torso, but the same case couldn't be said for the rest of the areas that you see throughout the nylon pieces, and as well as the hands right here that we've covered before. It's just painted on, and even though it's not a bad paint job, I was just expecting just a little more from someone like Hot Toys. The same could also be said about the Velcro quality used here to hold some of the pieces in place. Even though the straps are made out of this fabric that holds everything pretty well together, and even though some of the looser areas like the gauntlets right here are pretty much not exactly in place, they're snug in there enough to be able to not have them feel too loose, but they can still be moved with ease, sleight of hand, as you can see right there. It's the Velcro that I have probably the biggest problem, because in a matter of just an hour of fidgeting with the figure, some Velcro pieces came off, like the knee pad right here. And then on one of the elbows, there's supposed to be a pad on both of his elbows. And even though this one has still managed to cling on for dear life, it's actually the right one that did unfortunately manage to be removed from the elbow piece itself. I understand that it's an easy, quick fix via maybe some super glue of some kind, but that's not the point. The point is that with a company like Hot Toys, you expect them to use some higher quality glue to make sure that those pieces are adhesive together, and the fact that that didn't happen and that piece just came out right off by just handling the figure for about a little under an hour, it's a little worrisome. Since we're back here, let's tackle the cape, because I feel like in most recent years, capes from Hot Toys, mainly for Batman figures, have been a topic of discussion amongst collectors in more ways than one, because often there's some capes that are pretty awesome, and then more often than not, capes often get the brunt end of the stick when it comes to collectors pretty much just downright hating them and often seeking third parties to replace their capes for something that either doesn't flake or at least has some better posability and higher quality material made out of it. And here we have a cape that for the most part is, in my opinion, pretty good quality, but I definitely recognize that it's probably not the best effort that Hot Toys could have put forward. And as of the time of me recording this video and handling the figure now for a couple of days, I don't have any immediate problems because on one side you have kind of like this, like I said, I don't want to say it's nylon, it's more like a felt type of material on one side that is then stitched in with a pleather material on the other side that is notoriously known for flaking. So I am not ruling out the possibility that in some years' time, especially if I end up displaying the figure a little bit more, it's going to result in some flaking issues. But for the time being, it at least does a good job of emulating the realistic look of a cape via the pleathering design. And there are wires stripped throughout the cape itself on both the edges and the inwards parts that make it a little poseable, but it's also not the most reliable wires. I feel like some Mafex figures have had some stronger wiring to make better poses with from their capes versus that of Hot Toys right here. So if you kind of futz and fidget with the cape, you can kind of get in some dynamic poses. Me personally, I like to have it placed as high as possible to the shoulder piece as it can be right here, just to kind of widen the size of the cape, just so that it can match a little bit more of the look of the figure itself, especially since he does have a bigger suit. And so for me, this is kind of like the ideal look of how I would display him with the cape, but I know that in probably some months or even years' time, should a company like Jackson Yu or some other third party comes up with an even much more ideal cape for the Exisuit Batman, I will definitely be researching it. Poetically, I do feel like the movement or posability of that cape also matches the posability behind the figure itself. Sadly, this is probably the biggest detriment to this guy, one that I probably should have seen him coming, because the reputation behind armored Batman Hot Toys figures is not exactly the best one. Often they end up resulting in pretty much being statues because there has to be a compromise. Hot Toys cannot make armorized Batman figures with this much detail and sculpting behind those armored pieces and not have some of the articulation be sacrificed. Now, thankfully, we're off to a good start with the head joint because it is on a ball joint that is able to shift forwards and backwards in a way that allows it to look up and down, as well as being able to look left and right. It's a little snug on my joint, but there's an awful lot of tilting and posability happening alongside the neck joint that is actually pretty fluid. Same thing could be said for the shoulders. The shoulder pieces that are really well designed are on this hinge that allows it to kind of flex towards the outsides or towards the top, and therefore the arm joint is able to rotate almost all the way. Let's try to get it up there. All the way up, like you see right there, being able to reach up to the sky. But furthermore, there's actually a little bit of a shrugging motion happening inside of that joint that allows the shoulder to kind of move upwards and downwards, as well as properly extend, so long as you move that shoulder piece kind of out of the way. So you see right there that is happening pretty fluidly, especially with an awful lot of the armoring that is happening around this area. And there is some slight swiveling happening at the top of that joint, but not so much found in the bicep. Once you get to the elbows, you are able to slightly bend it at a 90-degree, but then you start to have an awful lot of the armor pieces, the gauntlet here, the plastic happening alongside the arm to kind of come in the way. So he's only really able to bend at a 90-degree angle, as you see before you're there. Nevertheless, you are able to rotate the wrists at the joints where you're able to swap them out, as well as slightly bend them inwards and outwards like so. The torso then gets a little interesting because you'll notice that there is some separation happening between the abs and the chest, and you are able to technically twist slightly to the left and slightly to the right at that joint, but of course the overall girth of that entire torso piece is gonna come into conflict with the rest of the abdomen. So do be careful when flushing those pieces and moving them from side to side. Slight tilting to the left and to the right on the obliques, but nothing really that can get you in several different very posable areas. Then we get to any kind of crunching, where you do get some slight crunch to the front, but that is much more achievable via the waist joint that is able to pivot forwards and slightly back But other than that, that's really about it. And it's funny because it's around this area that we do start to segue into the lack of posability and articulation with the rest of the figure. You guessed it, it's going to be on those legs. Despite having an awful lot of great detail with the shin areas that I was praising, the articulation is more or less sacrificed. You do get some slight movement towards the front on the legs and slightly towards the back, but you can see it's pretty much null and void via the nylon piece that's pretty much holding it all together. Slight extension towards the sides so that you can get them on some even footing, but that's honestly really about it. So not much found there. And the same could be said about those knees. There's enough mobility to at least demonstrate that hydraulic system that I was praising for and going giddy over earlier, but sadly, there's just so much happening there that is scaring me that I don't want to risk burdening or at least chipping away some of the plastic and causing some major wear and tear on those hydraulic pieces that the knee is pretty much stagnated, as you see before you're there. Then we get to the foot, where you are able to move the foot downwards about that far and slightly upwards, and you do have this piece right here that is joined to the top of the foot right above the ankle, and it's kind of, I think it's more so connected to the shin guard to allow mobility of said foot piece. But not much is really found there. I've seen some other Batman figures that are able to flex the foot forwards and backwards and even to the side a little bit much more generously. And here, it's not the greatest. And the problem here is that I would have accepted limited mobility or posability with those joints, but what really kind of kills it for me is knowing that because of how top heavy this guy is, thanks in part to the girthiness and again the construction quality behind this torso piece as well as the shoulders and the head, it's going to pretty much scare you almost constantly, like it's done me.
A few moments later.
Oh my god, not again! And you never truly know if he's going to be able to stand on his own, so you're going to have to rely on the remaining half of the accessories to either balance him out on an even base or set dress him to make him look a bit more dynamic, because he's not going to be able to be in any form of dynamic poses due to the articulation. Exosuit Batman comes with the cryo drill that he used in order to thwart Mr. Freeze in that DLC, as well as these what I like to call faucet pieces, but they're meant to be like extenders to kind of make it seem like the cryo drill is in power. And personally, I don't know how I feel about these faucet pieces, especially the very long one. I feel like it just kind of gets in the way a little bit, but they can both be attached to the cryo drill, and the drill itself is actually made out of this hollow plastic. It's sculpted well, but doesn't have enough weight to it to make it kind of a standout of an accessory. But the drill itself is able to rotate, so there's a bit of functionality there. And serving as this base with the nameplate is going to be this railing covered in ice along with this ice piece that is supposed to give some context to those very open hands that we talked about before, and it does a really great job of being able to give some dynamic feel to the figure, especially like I said before, can't really pose them all too greatly, so seeing as you can kind of assemble this piece together, and it's pretty simple and straightforward to put it all together, but once you kind of get them in some decent enough poses to make it look like one foot is on one step and then the other is kind of coming down, along with the cryo drill, it definitely amplifies the image of the figure. Seems to me that frankly I was somewhat blinded by how cool this figure looked that I forgot that Hot Toys sometimes sacrifices functionability and posability for the look of a figure when it comes to an armorized Batman. And I feel like the predecessor to this issue was going to be that armored Batman from the Batman vs. Superman line, the Ben Affleck Batman that had the armor, with an awful lot of complaints towards that figure being that you can't really pose him. And it looks like they're going for a repeat here in the form of Exosuit Batman. Even though he is still a solid Hot Toys figure and a very solid display piece for yourself, especially if you're going after a complete Hot Toys Batman collection and you're a huge fan of Arkham Origins, especially after 10 years of it being out, as well as the DLC, this is still a very worthwhile collectible figure for you to bring into your Hot Toys collection, but just know that it comes with the caveat that you're not really going to be able to pose them very well. Some of the flaking may happen with the cape, and some materials are still handled in a way that you would have expected a little better from Hot Toys, whether it be those chrome paint applications on the gauntlets, the little claws on and the clawed up toes on his boots, as well as the silver pieces amongst the bicep, and then most especially the quality of that Velcro that just simply came off and could have been handled a little better. Still, those are cons that I'm able to forgive because of the way that they were able to go above and beyond on the sculpting on the torso, the quality and feel, and the overall spectacle look of the armor, especially on those weathered pieces that are supposed to look like they've taken damage, along with the hydraulic areas on the knees, and just the overall presentation value you get out of this guy. Pulling him out of the box and then displaying him up on the shelf is just, like I said before, a showpiece. And if you are a huge fan of the Batman Arkham series and you're going after that collection, especially from a company like Hot Toys, just know that there's going to be some trade-offs when getting this figure. Trade-offs that make me consider giving it a 7 out of 10 as a final rating. And if you are still in the market for the XE suit Arkham Origins Batman, there's going to be an affiliate link in the description. If you guys use it, it does help out the channel, and you guys can bring this showpiece to your collection in the process. Otherwise, guys, appreciate you for watching the review. I am intending on bringing forth some more Hot Toys figures because I quite frankly have a huge ton of them to review for the channel while we wait for some more McFarlane stuff. Maybe some Marvel Legends stuff, I don't know. And then, of course, the countdown to Spider-Man 2. Nevertheless, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. Click this other review showing up on screen right now if you guys want to see some more content. And until next time, guys, stay humble. I'll see you later.